You're listening to Soundside. I'm KUOW's Paige Browning, in for Libby Dinkman. Seattleites have been closely watching election results for nearly a week since polls closed. That's because the city's mayoral candidates are still in a tight race. Longtime Seattle politician and current mayor Bruce Harrell is trying to win a second term. His challenger is Katie Wilson, a Democratic socialist who has never held elected office before. Last night's vote tally gave more clarity about who is likely to lead the city next year. Here to talk about it is the person following the results almost as closely as the campaigns themselves, Kat Smith, KUOW's politics editor. Kat,
hi.
Is your mouse still working from hitting refresh on the results? I see you over there.
My mouse is struggling. I've never hit refresh more in my life.
Well, more to come today. After last night's ballot drop, what does the Seattle mayor's race look like right now?
Well, Katie Wilson pulled farther ahead last night, and it's starting to look like she could unseat Mayor Bruce Harrell, he's trying to win the second term for himself. After Tuesday's ballot count, Wilson was 1,300 votes ahead.
Okay.
Last week, Harrell was in the lead, but with every ballot drop, Wilson's been picking up more and more votes. But, counting's not done yet. I know it feels like we've been taking forever, but it's still a little bit too early to call this race. Election officials told me last night there's still about 1,400 ballots left to count. And then and then there are about as many challenge ballots out there that weren't counted because there was a problem with the signature on the ballot. So there are still some variables in this very tight race.
More ballots left to count than the number of votes that Wilson's even ahead by.
Yeah.
So not time to declare victory just yet.
Not quite yet. And people have been a little fast in this election to declare victory. Last week, Decision Desk HQ, a national election results firm, projected that Harrell would win the race. That was a little confusing because at that point, Wilson had been gaining on him by then.
Yeah.
They retracted that projection on Friday. Now that Wilson's widening her lead, I'm seeing consultants and poll watchers declaring victory for Wilson. And look, the math is probably on her side here. But given how chaotic this race has been and how many more ballots there are left to count, I think we all need to just take a deep breath, wait for a little bit more counting. There's really not that much left to go. We can do this.
We can do this. It is so tight, though. What have you heard from the campaigns about the state of the race right now? Is Wilson declaring victory? Is Harrell holding out hope?
Okay, even the campaigns are being a little careful here. I talked to Katie Wilson's camp last night, and they stopped just short of declaring victory. They're feeling good, right? They're feeling really good. They recognize there's more counting left to do. And Harrell's campaign told me the same thing. They said this race is really close. There's more counting. This morning, our reporter Amy Radel checked in with Wilson again, and she said the Harrell campaign has not talked to her yet. So if the campaigns aren't talking, it's still on. Right now, both campaigns are out there curing ballots, which is a process. Yeah, curing. It's a process where you try to get in touch with voters who've had their ballots rejected because of problems with their signature. It's a labor-intensive process. It takes forever. There's no guarantee that those ballots will ever get counted. And there are about 1,500 of those ballots in Seattle that got rejected. And those rejected ballots tend to belong to younger voters. And that's a demographic that swings hard for Wilson in polling. I talked to Andrew Villeneuve this morning about this. He's the founder of the Northwest Progressive Institute, NPI, a left-leaning polling organization. Their data says the cured ballots would heavily favor Wilson if they're able to get all of those fixed.
Okay.
Andrew said to me, quote, "We think Wilson has it."
Wow, that's a statement.
Yeah. But there, like I said, there's another ballot drop today at 4 p.m. We're going to be watching to see what happens. And then the campaigns also have until November 24th, a few days before Thanksgiving, to cure as many ballots as they can.
All of those ballots are going to count at this point. I mean, of course they count, but they will all matter as we get closer to knowing the mayor. You have reported for KUOW, Kat, that this is one of the closest elections in the last quarter century in Seattle. Wowza. The last mayoral race that was within a few thousand votes was in 2001. Is there potential for a recount?
Oh, yeah. Right now, we are still in recount territory right now. A machine recount gets automatically triggered when there's less than 2,000 votes separating the candidates and less than 0.5%. And we are just inside that margin right now. Now, that could change tonight if a ballot drop swings hard for Wilson. Again, she pulls further ahead, no recount. There's another kind of recount, a hand recount, but that happens at less than 150 votes. On Monday, it was sort of looking like, okay, maybe that could be possible. But after Wilson pulled ahead yesterday, if anything, it looks like the machine recount is more likely.
Okay.
If the current ratio holds, the recount would happen in a couple weeks after election officials finalize finalize the results. King County is going to certify on November 25th, and then the recount happens after. And a machine recount doesn't take that long. Haley Watkins, who is the comms director for King County's elections department, she said it'll probably take a couple days. And it's important to note that like recounts are really rare. That margin we just talked about, that's insanely close. And that really tight mayoral race in 2001 that you mentioned a minute ago, that race was within about 3,000 votes. No recount.
So no recount.
No recount there. There hasn't been a mayoral recount in Seattle in recent memory. And yesterday I was looking through the city archives online while the city election office was closed for the Veterans Day holiday. I couldn't find a mayoral recount in recent history.
Yeah, definitely not the last 20 years. On Election Day, Kat, Mayor Harrell led by more than 10,000 votes. Today, he's down by over 1,000 votes. Anyone who's watched Seattle elections knows about the progressive swing of ballots that come in later. Does the size of this spring swing surprise you, or are we just seeing the same trend in a really tight race?
I did expect to see this kind of a swing in favor of Wilson. I didn't know whether she'd be able to pull off a win, but I did expect her to pick up votes in the days after Election Day. I've only been covering elections in Seattle for about 4 years, but in that time I've noticed that some races can see a rather dramatic swing toward the more lefty candidate as more ballots get counted and released. Katie Wilson identifies as a Democratic socialist. Harrell's more moderate than her. He's still a liberal, but compared to Wilson, he's the more centrist candidate. Left-wing voters, they tend to skew younger too, and polling in this election indicated that Wilson had the youth appeal. She's a millennial. She ran on a populist platform. You know, the rent is too high. Pizza's too expensive. Childcare costs are out of control. I was looking at ballot drop returns around the city. And on Election Day, the box outside Seattle Central College in Capitol Hill, that's the heart of the city's Gen Z voting bloc, that ballot box saw a crush of ballots on Election Day, more than any other drop box in King County. And that's exactly Katie Wilson's demo. It's the neighborhood where she lives, too. And we got some tape on election night in front of that Cap Hill drop box where there was a ballot drop party taking place. People were, getting a little rowdy, encouraging young folks to vote and put their ballot in that box.
Like rock the vote.
Yeah, rock the vote. Get your ballot in before 8 p.m. Do it here. It was kind of lit. Here, listen to this tape.
All right, everyone, welcome Seattle to election night. We got a ballot box over here that wants your vote.
Wow, and that was right at the deadline.
Yeah, the energy. And so, it's no surprise that drop box ended up being the most popular on election night. And when you look back at Harrell's first run for mayor 4 years ago, he also suffered from this lefty swing back then. His lead over Lorena Gonzalez was huge on election night, but it did narrow over the next few days. Now, he did win that race, and he won it by a decent margin. But we've seen this happen in plenty of races in Seattle where lefties vote late, and then we saw it happen to Harrell 4 years ago.
Yeah. Kat, final question for you.
Yeah.
Katie Wilson taking on the role of mayor would be a big shift from the Harrell administration. Voters seemed to want that shift. They voted out other incumbents this year. If Wilson wins, what do you expect to change on day one at the mayor's office?
Well, Harrell's been hitting Wilson hard on the campaign trail for her lack of experience in office. She's never held elected office before. That's true. She'll need to come up to speed really quickly. And she's said that. She said that in interviews with us. She knows she's going to need to surround herself with an experienced transition team that can help. We're seeing Zoran Mamdani do that in New York City right now. And Wilson wants to aggressively ramp up spending on affordable housing and moving homeless people inside. She'll want to hit the ground running on that as soon as she gets into City Hall. But before that, first, if she actually does win this thing, if she can pull this off, she told us that she's looking forward to just having a day off for a change. Wilson talked to our reporter Amy Radel this morning about the first thing she wants to do if she wins. And here's what she said.
Right now, I'm on the 22nd floor of the Smith Tower looking out over the water, and I see some ferries out there, and I think a nice ferry trip to Bainbridge Island could be a fun way to spend a day.
Okay, a nice ferry trip to spend the day if she wins. Kat Smith is KUOW's politics editor. Thank you so much, Kat.
Thanks, Paige.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. This show is only possible because listeners support us. If you're able to give right now, please check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.